Right. I'm picking up on your point, right? It seems like it's frustrating to have white people kind of seem to be not knowing this, and that my book is reinforcing that. So that's good food for thought for me, if that's indeed what you're hinting at. But basically everything I said, I seriously couldn't have said any of this to you before I started getting my worldview challenged by people of color, and that's part of it. White people do not have, for the most part, authentic cross-racial relationships.
One thing about race publicly, but privately, and every decision that they make that has to do with their lives, they will do the opposite when it comes to their views on race. So that's, you asked who the target audience is. I guess my audience, the audience I'm looking for is, it's just people who are searching for that private truth that they refuse to publicly admit, which is why. So that's most of America. And hey, most people don't want to hear this. That's America for you. America is a country that publicly says one thing and privately does the exact opposite. It's that simple. That's America for you.
So, because we seem to be running out of time, that's okay. I'm going to try to get to the more critical questions now.
I'll come back anytime you'll have me, Cree, because let me tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. You asked some very pointed questions, and it's been a privilege so far. So thank you.
Well, we will definitely have to have you back. I'll take you up on that, and thank you for agreeing to come on. Like I said, I wasn't sure you would do it, but I was very glad to hear you pick up the phone. So thank you so far, I'm learning. Now, what are the things? I mean, I think this is really why you're here. What are the types of things that white people will say when no black people are around? What are the things that white people say that they don't want black people to hear?
What are the things that white people don't want black people to hear?
That they really think, yes.
Wow, that's a tough question.
Well, yes, that is a tough question. Not because it's hard to recall them, but because you've got to give a response to what it is that white people keep from black people, and yet continue to keep those things from black people, because remember, you've just told us that that's what white people do. They say things that are not true to black people, and they keep the things that they say that they mean from black people, about black people, from black people. So that is going to be tough. Let's see what he says.
Wow, that's a tough question. I think one of the things that you'll hear people say, white people will be sitting around a table and they'll bring up a city, and someone will go, "Oh gosh, it's not safe to go there. It's such a ghetto." Maybe someone's talking about, say, I'm just going to throw some cities out, but like Richmond, Virginia. Someone will be like, "Oh God, I had a friend that went to University of Richmond, and he had such problems there, getting around. He got his car stolen." And someone will be like, "Well, that's because it's a ghetto." And then someone will be like, "Well, no, it's not. It's because it's ghetto. It's because there's a high preponderance of black crime there."
Is that how they say it? Could you say to us the way they say it?
That's what I say. I like to have fun with verbalization. No, people will say it's because of black crime. It's because Richmond. It's like Baltimore. Someone will be like, "Oh, I was going to go to a Ravens game or a Baltimore Orioles game, but God, you try and park and you have to go through just this horrible ghetto." And then someone will be like, "You mean blacks?" Or yeah, it's kind of like when Donald Trump just inadvertently said, when he was talking about how he had a great relationship with the blacks. I mean, that might be one of the only public admissions where somebody said something that was so to the point.
More truth. Maybe it does get better than the last one. So he's saying that when people complain about having to go through areas where there are a lot of black people, and someone uses the term ghetto to describe why it is an undesirable area to reside in, pass through, etc., other white people will just correct them or make it more plain by simply saying, oh, it's not a ghetto. It's because there's a lot of black people there. In other words, it might be, and as we're going to hear later on, it might be neighborhoods full of manicured lawns with people who have middle income paying jobs, predominantly in the government if you're black. And it's not that it's ghetto in the sense that people don't have enough money to keep things up. It's just that there are a lot of black people there, and that's an undesirable place to be. Paul tells it real plain. He's making it real plain. And so this whole monolithic thing that he describes Donald Trump as having said is it's very clear to white people that, you know, what's the difference between a dignified black person and an undignified black person? One is dignified and one is not. They're the blacks. We're the blacks.
Donald Trump just inadvertently said when he was talking about how he had a great relationship with the blacks. I mean, that might be one of the only public admissions where somebody said something that was so to the point, because a lot of white people look at blacks as being monolithic in their thought. And take a look at the Atlanta public school fiasco, where you got to see human biodiversity hilariously play itself out, where for 10 years the black school system there was manufacturing grades and creating false reports for one of the standardized tests. And look, whites have fled Atlanta. Whites have created suburbs all over the country, all over Atlanta, to get away from black people. And to be truthful, this is in every major city like Memphis and Birmingham. They've created thriving suburbs. And people always be like, well, we can't go live in Birmingham. We can't go eat at a restaurant in Memphis. We can't go down and go to King Street in Memphis, or, gosh, we have to live in one of these different parishes in New Orleans because it's just not safe to live in New Orleans. And then, you might hear someone just chime in and be like, well, it's because blacks live there. It's because, Memphis is synonymous with crime. Well, Memphis is also 85% black, and most whites are actually pretty tactful. They're not going to say things. They're not going to say it. They're going to use words that sort of are code for whites. When someone says ghetto, that's synonymous with black. When somebody says, we moved to an area because they have a good school system, a safe community, that's code word. That's pretty much synonymous with there are less than 5% blacks in this area, and the schools are good because, well, there aren't that many black students that are enrolled there. So, most whites are,
even with each other. You folks use that kind of coded terminology even when there are no black people around.
Well, because we live in a society where you can't say anything bad about blacks. You live in a society where even the slightest slip of the tongue about black people is ruinous to your career, to your social and societal acceptance and rising up the ladder of, really, I think it should be called the ladder of tolerance, because the higher you go in a organization, it's because you have been as bland and as non-confrontational and combative as possible by going to all the diversity seminars and saying the right things and playing the right politics. Look, this is go to diversityinc.com. That's real America now. That's what corporate America has become. It's not like whites are going in and cracking racial jokes while they play on the 18 holes of golf or go smoke cigars. To succeed in America now, you cannot say anything negative about, as Donald Trump called them, the blacks. I mean, I think you saw what happened to Michael Richards, where he basically had to where he had to go and grovel in the court of public opinion after he said those regrettable things to the hecklers, which, there's no reason for him to do that. But you saw how quickly he was lambasted by virtually everyone. I don't think anyone defended him. Most whites understand. Okay, Kurt, here's the answer for you. White people understand how to play the game in America, how to rise that ladder of tolerance, that corporate ladder. They understand that if you do anything confrontation, any studies on in academia, any studies on differences in the racial gap in learning, why that actually exists, or patterns in crime, that could jeopardize your career and your hopes of a future of your future and your vocation in what I call Black Run America, which Black Run America is a term that has gained popularity on the internet, and it just simply means that America exists in every facet possible for the advancement of Black people, to the detriment of the majority population. And whites will bend over backwards to see Black advancement in academia and in the military and in corporate America. And you can see that by the disproportionate levels of Black involvement in the federal government and local and state governments, which is one of the reasons why the Black middle class is rapidly falling apart before our eyes, because Black people rely so much on government employment to be in the middle class. And that's Black Run America in a nutshell.
Here, Mr. Kersey tells us that white people will punish other white people for not practicing the deceit that he's already told us they uniformly practice well enough. If you do not demonstrate a high degree of skill in practicing deceit, coded language about what it is that white people do, you will be punished. In other words, that is the set of rules for the system of white supremacy now.
Okay. In Two-Faced Racism, very constructive book. I would highly encourage non-white listeners, victims of racism, white supremacy, check this book out if you want to get an in-depth look at what white people talk about when there are no non-white people around. Excellent book. At the very beginning and really throughout this book, one of the things that stood out to me is that you talked about how, yes, racism and white people making racist comments or doing racist things against all non-white people, but the core of this was aggressively anti-Black. You said that, and I believe you said that you ended up with about 1,000, or I think you said earlier about 600 college students, but there ended up being thousands of pages of these journal entries from these white students who were just keeping a log of different racist episodes that they had, that about 75% of these incidents involved racist comments or acts directed at Black people specifically. And I believe in the book, either you or your co-author, Leslie Pica, indicated that you all were even surprised at the number of times the word nigger came up in these journals. Can you talk about this aggressively anti-Black sentiment that you saw in the research?
Yes, it's a good example of why white-on-Black oppression has been so much more central to North American development than oppression of other people of color. You know, there is some discussion among non-Black people of color, including scholars and leaders, about Black Americans and the so-called Black-white binary getting too much attention. And much of that discussion does not consider or relate to the fact that whites have put white-on-black oppression and their conceptions of whites and blacks at the very center of this society, at the center of the white frame. The reason that there's so much more discussion and focus on black Americans is because whites who have that power and privilege we were talking about before have made it so. And some of the discussion from scholars and leaders of color who are not black seem to be implying that black Americans control that discourse and reality, but they don't. Whites have controlled that reality. And to get back to your question about the diary, student diaries, even in Rocky Mountain states, where there are very few African Americans, white college students get together and tell racist jokes. 3/4 of them will be anti-black jokes. So anti-black jokes, anti-black commentaries are common among white college students in all regions of the country, no matter what the black population is. And that's because the white-on-black or anti-black imagery and stereotypes and prejudices and images are at the heart of the white racial frame and have been for 400 years.
Racist jokes. I have been talking about racist jokes for a while and talking about the importance of deconstructing those jokes, what exactly is said, what they're conveying, how the non-white people are represented, if there are metaphors in the jokes, of really trying to investigate every aspect of those jokes. And I feel like this book, you all just did an incredible job of that, and I assume you had a lot of that material to deal with. Can you talk about, I guess, the importance, what role racist jokes serve in the white supremacist frame, which you call the white frame? Can you talk about the role that racist jokes play in that?
I think you nailed it. That's a very critical question today, because so much white racist commentary in the front stage in the public sphere is put in humorous terms. So when somebody like some radio talk show host, Don Imus, made that famous racist comment about those wonderful female basketball players at Rutgers University. He tried to put it in a joking format. And when you go into these backstage settings, as you just suggested, our diaries are full of young college-educated whites going to play cards with his friends or have a beer with friends or relatives. And often central to the discussion, and you can call it performances, of the whites in those settings is telling jokes. You know, one of the first ones we talk about is sick and white men who play cards and get together most weekends, and a student who's describing a recent incident said, you know, first my friends started telling anti-Semitic jokes. And then they started using the term Oriental and telling, quote, Oriental racist jokes, making up a song from the song Yellow, using lyrics for the song Yellow, mocking the flash burnings of people of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombing. And then they went from that. Some guy in the group decided he'd make a Hallmark greeting card, and on the front was kittens and lace, and on the inside it said, "You're an N-word." And then they started making racist jokes about Mexicans driving radical cars so they could get lettuce at the same time. So the evening seemed to be bookend with these joking, and you probably need to put the word joking in quote marks, joking racist commentaries. It's very commonplace, not only in the backstage settings, but, you know, it crashes out into the front stage, which are diverse settings where people besides whites are present. It frequently crashes in the front stage, and then whites try to put this laughing, oh, I was just joking, I didn't mean it, I was just joking, kind of framing of it. So I think your question is a critical, central one. Why do we do this? You know, why do people, especially white people, put these jokes in, put their racist commentaries into a joking framework? And I suppose there's several theories. Sigmund Freud, going back 100 years ago, you know, Sigmund Freud's theory about joking was it was a way for people to do socially incorrect, impolite, improper, nasty stuff. It was a way to do that in public that was somewhat legitimated because it was said in a joking framework. It's kind of a way, Freud argued, to get the seamy side out in front, where how you really thought about things out in front, out in public, and to excuse it as joking. That is, it's not really serious. And I think there's some truth to that. You know, that's one reason that whites do racist joking. It's a way to let out the way you really feel and to give you a backdoor way out. If somebody calls you on it, which again is fairly rare in white backstages, but if somebody does call you on it in the front stage or the backstage, you've got that bailout. You've got the parachute, right? The parachute says, oh, I was just joking. Yeah, you're certainly right. That's one of the things that happens, and we see it in our diaries too, is that backstage can easily become a front stage. There are these transitional, there's a lot of slippage. We talk about it in the book as slippage. So that you get somebody like that, what was he, head of hospitality or something in Tennessee?
Yes, sir.
The irony of that. But he thought he was in a backstage, right? But when the emails came into the front stage, that frequently happens. Whites think they're in a safe backstage. And the reason they do a lot of blatantly racist stuff these days backstage is they feel it's safe. There will be very few whites who will dissent. And they can get away with it. They say how they really feel. So they feel it's a safe backstage. But they forget that backstage can quickly become a front stage setting, and then you have to do something about it, because in this modern era, most whites see themselves as good people, and they know good people don't do racist stuff in public. So if it gets into the public, they start all of this apology, I didn't really mean it, I was just joking, all of these excuses. Try to cover up, I think, in most cases, the real view of the world.
People need to understand. I mean, I'm kind of picking up on your point, right? It seems like it's frustrating to have white people kind of seem to be not knowing this, and that my book is reinforcing that. So that's good food for thought for me, if that's indeed what you're hinting at. But basically, everything I said, I seriously couldn't have said any of this to you before I started getting my worldview challenged by people of color, and that's part of it. White people do not have, for the most part, authentic cross-racial relationships. And I always tell white people, if you have friends of color and you're not talking about racism, or they're not challenging you on your racism, the relationship's nowhere near as authentic as you think it is. So we need to understand what racism is, let go of this damn good, bad,